Alrighty, hello every folks, good morning or afternoon or whatever it may happen to be. So I wanted to do a quick little follow-up on the last couple of videos because there were a few details that I missed, and at this point they're already out, so it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to go back and like cancel them out and then attempt to go fix those details and what have you, since basically it was one day where I had just kind of done a bunch of them at once. But anyway, let's go ahead and cover a few details here. So specifically, most of this is going to be in regards to the Ranger as well as the Dark Priest, and also the Cyclops. So first of all, there was one detail that the Veil was mentioning as far as the Cyclops, in which they have an interesting quirk I forgot to mention. They can actually use Abyss 1 and 2 for whatever reason. I guess the idea, as Warren Report was saying earlier, is supposed to be that, you know, they're a creature of the Abyss, so they can control the Abyss or what have you. It's like it's one of those things where it's almost tailor-made to not function well in their hands, but you know, it's technically a thing you can do. Reason being that well, all of the Apocrypha spells are, while powerful, also generally something that benefits a lot more from units that can actually have the equipment to get all those intelligence bonuses. They don't really have huge bonuses in and of themselves, but they also have next to no MP regeneration going on, so... Well, I say next to no. Like, anything 50 or below, they can sort of make work by means of using their bulk to attack and counterattack stuff. They're essentially making use of a lot of those little MP upticks from attacking stuff. In order to be able to, for example, afford a spell charge and then go send it to the dragon, and the dragon can go use their breath and stuff like that. They're a tricky unit, but they're fun to kind of employ in that way. Now, that said, it's also a little bit of an odd duck with them, where, yeah, you have your Apocrypha spells that are going to cost 90 to actually cast, and that is egregiously expensive, and, like, they'll be able to afford that sometime around, you know, when the average millennial can afford a house. It's just almost tailor-made to not actually work for them. Which, again, I assume is mostly for funny reasons. I actually didn't realize up until doing a little bit more research on it that supposedly back on PSP they actually uniquely got access to fire and water summons and no other summons, which, again, in their hands were almost uniquely useless at the time. Anyway, so anyways, I guess it's just a little bit of an in-joke on their part. Now, let's go ahead and talk about the Dark Priest and Ranger real quick. So there's two actual use cases, one of which I touched upon for the Dark Priest, but I didn't mention how to actually improve her, which is kind of making me smack myself upside the head since yesterday. And the other is actually an interesting use case that I didn't even think about for Vyce up until after the video was already released, and that's basically being that Vyce is kind of the dedicated weaponized recruiter, if you think about it. So a lot of his offensive potential there is interesting in that it's high damage, but not like fatal levels of damage. Many endgame units get, for example, like you even got your basic warriors with your mighty strikes and your double impacts and stuff like that, and they would be able to repeatedly, you know, throw out this kind of insane like one-shot kill level damage under the right circumstances. Whereas the Rangers almost uniquely set up in such a way that they'll almost kill something, but not quite. So, for example, they would spend a lot of recovery time in order to use their double attack, and using two heavy weapons, that is very, very expensive and potentially very dangerous. It leaves them completely vulnerable. Now, that being said, if, for example, they were to utilize this, due to the fact that they have Recruit, in such a way where they almost kill something and then recruit it, that is actually a really solid way to overcome both weaknesses of that initial design. And it does kind of make sense in terms of Recruit very literally being in the center of their skill bar there as something that they should be doing. Now, their weapon access does mean that one of their best kind of flexible options is to opt into having those kind of different weapon options in order to have different finishers on hand to be able to do different things. But if you're going for a double attack and recruit build, that actually does work surprisingly well. It's kind of like they're good at saving people and then also, you know, attempting to finish them off in another way. But I'm talking about something like this here, where he does have a lot of different options, but he's one of the... Actually, he's almost uniquely situated in such a way where he could make something like Swords, Axes, Double Attack, and Recruit actually function. In this case, I forgot to take the Crest of Fire off him, but, you know, you can just give him whatever. Probably a She-Ring would work out pretty well in this case, just because he doesn't have Steadfast, so we'll go ahead and throw that on him. But yeah, he actually has a lot of, he can actually make use of a lot of very niche things. So like something like the Trobion over here is a one-handed crafting axe, not really handy for too many units, but in his case, where he's going for dual wielding of, for example, lightning weapons in his case, in order to maximize that kind of single target damage here instead of being flexible, that can work pretty well for him, as well as a sword and axe gives him access to, well, mostly a lot of ice, but it does give him a few different options for debuffs, for basically being able to attack a little bit quicker, like Rendingale. Oftentimes it's overlooked how it's essentially one of the best technical DPS moves that there is, on account of recovery time only being 15, and even swinging one of these weapons by themselves is going to be 30 or 31. Like it's 61 recovery time for him to double attack with this stuff, whereas it's only 15 to use the finisher. So there's a lot of those kind of cases to potentially consider, which is why finishers become so strong towards the end game, because using the weapons in their default form is going to be very expensive. Anyway, so I just wanted to throw that out there. Yeah, double attack plus recruit is actually pretty functional. I was playing around with this a little bit yesterday, and yeah, this is good. This is actually a pretty solid use case for him. It doesn't work in a lot of post-game areas, but for going and clearing through stuff like Palace of the Dead, because Recruit does work on zombies and such, or going and, clearing out Farampa, or if you're just going and relic farming and you're just looking to recruit people that way, he's actually a very effective weaponized recruiter. So that's a fun use case. This is kind of exactly what I was hoping to find with the Ranger. I use Recruit all the time. It just never occurred to me as the thing he should be doing. So yeah, that works out pretty darn well. Next up, I wanted to talk about the Dark Priest. There's actually a couple of things I wanted to mention here. So if you're looking to set up a weaponized Dark Priest, you want to have them be a massive threat at multiple ranges or anything along those lines, really consider something like this. Yes, they don't have Meditate. This is fine. Essentially what this unit does is, well, get close. And if you want to convince them to get close, a good way to do that is to convince them to use books. Some of the book finishers have ranged attacks, which is all well and good, but given the fact that they are suddenly a melee class, they're more tempted to get close. Now, I was saying use the Stinky set, and this absolutely works with the Stinky set. Their relic access, being a caster type, is somewhat limited, given that they primarily have to rely on the Garb of Sages here to get their defenses, which is not super impressive. It's really going to be the Garb of Sages, as well as any kind of fancy shoes that you've got on hand that are really going to benefit them here, especially something like the Watery Greaves can be a pretty good defensive option on them. They're probably one of the better shoes. They're not limited. Pretty much everybody can use them. And yeah, very high defenses, very good vitality for the slot there. So it's going to give him a good solid option there. In this case, I wanted to give her the She Shoes. This is slightly less defense, but then going for something like the Grand Grimoire gives an additional 10 vitality, which is the equivalent of a vitality ring, as well as 5 luck, useful for those crits. Obviously, you do have the whole two-handed relic thing in terms of not necessarily applying those casting bonuses where they probably should be. But either way, one other optimization I didn't mention before is that her necklace is basically taking over for the blue necklace back in PSP, where her necklace is the super overpowered one this time. Because you remember how back in PSP, like, Denim's necklace was like, oh, it's pretty good because it's got stun proof, and this time it's like, well, I guess it's extra health and extra luck, and the strength and vitality is nice. What's the one number that you see that's super unique on this particular pile? Because her necklace is actually legitimately best in slot for one particular thing that synergizes perfectly with the Dark Priest. And I can't believe I missed this earlier, because this was a little bit different. I believe this was actually a weight 1 item back on PSP. I don't have that in front of me to check, but this is a negative weight 10. Negative 10! Even the Fire Crest is only negative 7. So this thing is legitimately better than the Fire Crest in terms of being a speed boost. Additionally, she's also the only one that can use it, even though it says that everybody can. If you try to equip it on anybody else, it just says that they can't. So where is this thing? So only Cashua can equip this item if you try to equip it on anybody else. So just so you know, that is also a thing, which typically will help quite a bit with something like this, equipping a Grand Grimoire instead of one of the books there. does theoretically cut down on weight. I guess book plus shield is more or less the same thing, but this does give her more kind of natural range, that 10 vitality. Best she can do otherwise is going to be 2 vitality off the shield. It gives a little bit of better hard defense, but I would say that that's not necessarily as worth it as that 10 vitality. Since Vitality is kind of like armor in its own right and just kind of scales things down, it's just generally the best defensive stat if you've got it. You can potentially go for, like, let's say, combining a Caldia with it, which might give you better resistance, but I just feel like pound for pound for the Dark Priest, Grand Grimoire is probably one of the best options. Again, very few classes can make use of books in their actual weaponized state here, and something like these moves over here would be pretty legit in her hands. Ideally, if fully maxing this out, this would be something like a Hellhound 2, though if she isn't running Meditate, Hellhound 1 would probably do the job just fine. It just lets her act a little bit faster. Like the idea behind this particular build right here is that she's consistently taking more and more actions, and if she gets knocked out, she's got Insight to then have more MP when she's brought back, to then immediately bring her offensive skills online again, to then go forward again. She's set up as a offensive AI build right now, whereas if playing manually, might play a bit more defensively with her, but either way, just wanted to throw a few more details out there as far as ideas for those two go. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of funky things you can do with Lord. So again, if you had missed it in the longer video because it tended to get left, I'm going to leave that whole that rupture phalanx thing for later. I gotta get going. All right, y'all have yourselves a good one. Take care. Just hopefully those few extra notes help. All right.